Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, and we have a 45 days of reprieve on government shutdown talk. But fear not, we have Representative Matt Gaetz, who now wants to bring a motion to vacate the chair and try to have another 45 days of a speaker battle. It's a it is what it is, but I'm going to let Matt Gaetz speak for himself, and then I'll give comment on it. And truthfully, some of you may not like my comments, but the fact is, I think we have to actually deal with what's going on honestly, and I'm going to do that today.
I mean, now is the man leading that charge against Speaker McCarthy, Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. So you have been thinking to top McCarthy to a motion to vacate the speakership if he worked with Democrats to fund the government with a clean CR, clean government spending bill, which is exactly what he did on Friday and Saturday. The House gavels back in tomorrow at noon. Are you going to make a motion to vacate?
Speaker McCarthy made an agreement with House conservatives in January. And since then, he has been in brazen, repeated material breach of that agreement. This agreement that he made with Democrats to really blow past a lot of the spending guardrails we'd set up is a last straw. And then overnight, I learned that Kevin McCarthy had a secret deal with Democrats on Ukraine. So as he was baiting Republicans to vote for a continuing resolution without Ukraine money, saying that we were going to jam the Senate on Ukraine, he then turns around and makes a secret deal. Now, I know you and I probably have different views on U.S. involvement in Ukraine, but however you think about that question, it should be subject to open review, analysis, and not some backroom deal.
Okay, let's start right there. I think that this is let's just material breach. Matt Gaetz did not vote for McCarthy for Speaker. Let's be clear. He voted present. What McCarthy agreed to back in the day, and nobody's ever seen the agreement per se, but what McCarthy did agree to, we know, was to put 2 members of the House Freedom Caucus on the Rules Committee. That has had a tremendous impact on what actually passes the House. When there's egregious language in a bill, having access to Rules Committee to fix it has been a godsend and has made a huge difference too. Matt Gaetz was determined from day one to not have a spending bill passed. He was determined to oppose any spending bill. He did not. When a new bill was negotiated between Chip Roy and Scott Perry, the head of the Freedom Caucus, and the liberal wing of the House Republican Party, that passed, that included major reforms on immigration and kept the spending caps at the levels that they were for the debt ceiling deal, which isn't great, but it's better than nothing. When that was negotiated, Matt Gaetz said no. Matt Gaetz kept being, I know for a fact that he kept getting given numbers and say, what if the spending was cut to this, would you vote for it? If the spending was cut for this, would you vote for it? With a balancing act, because Speaker McCarthy doesn't get to tell the other members of the House, Republicans, how they're going to vote, just like he can't tell Matt Gaetz how to vote. So Matt Gaetz assumes that the Speaker has this magic wand that he can force people who don't agree with Matt Gaetz to vote the way Matt Gaetz wants them to vote, with no reciprocal action by Matt Gaetz. I mean, it is the most naive, the most almost incredibly selfish, grandstanding kind of maneuver that I've seen in Congress in many, many years. And now he's sitting there saying he's going to do the motion to vacate. Of course he was. That's what he always wanted. He always wanted the whole thing, the standing up and I'm not going to vote for this, I'm not going to vote for that. The moving goalposts of what could be done and what was needed. There was no way to get to yes on funding the government with Matt Gaetz. If there's no way to get to yes, you don't get to complain when they get to yes with votes from somebody else. That's just, I'm sorry, but that is the rules. And it's this assumption that listen, the worst case scenario was that this occurred, that McCarthy goes across the aisle. Of course he's going to go across the aisle. That's the model that Boehner started and Ryan continued. But Matt Gaetz made it an inevitability that that was going to occur when they could have passed legislation that kept the spending levels at a lower level than they're at now. So those increased spending levels, they're on Matt Gaetz because he wouldn't agree to the spending levels. And the fact we didn't have a bill going over to the Senate that had major reforms on our immigration policy would have forced the Biden administration to enforce our border laws. In fact, that didn't occur and won't occur for another 45 days. That's on Matt Gaetz. It's on Matt Gaetz, nobody else, him. So now he's going to do a motion to vacate and stomp his feet and say, well, I didn't get my way. Well, buddy, you know what? You played a game and you had an outcome you wanted, and that was a motion to vacate. It's the outcome you wanted since the very beginning of this session, was to have a motion to vacate against McCarthy. And what you've done through this process is you've strengthened McCarthy's hand, where you can have 1,000 votes on motion to vacate on who's the next speaker is. And 210 Republicans will vote for McCarthy, and 6 will vote with you. 10 will vote with you, maybe. You've solidified McCarthy's majority and have created the exact opposite situation you intended. And I hope you run for governor of Florida. Works out real well in 4 years. But my gosh, throwing away the border security piece, we weren't going to win it all in the House and the Senate. We might not have won any in the Senate. The Republicans in the Senate are terrible by and large. But the House could have at least drawn a marker and said, no, we're not accepting anything that doesn't deal with the border, and force the Senate and the president to deal with it. But they lost all leverage because this one guy and a couple of his friends, this one guy said, gee, I want to get rid of McCarthy, and there's no deal you can present me that won't get rid of McCarthy. Sorry, but Matt Gaetz, I've had it. And I've been, the problem with all this is Matt Gaetz is right in so many ways. He's right. We need to deal with weaponization of government. He's right. We need to deal with the Biden attempt to eliminate the internal combustion engine. He's right. We need to really have a real fight about Ukraine as opposed to side deals. He's right about all that stuff. He's right. Government's too big. 100% right. But sometimes the truth is you can't eat the whole elephant at once. You gotta do bite-sized portions. And when you only have a 5-vote majority in one chamber and a Senate where truthfully you've got about 80 on the other side, on a partisanship's notwithstanding, you got about 80 on the other side, 20 on yours, and you have in the Biden administration who's antithetical to anything that's whole, limited government or good, or actively trying to destroy our country. You have to take wins when you can get them, and what he should have held McCarthy responsible for is passing the bill and saying, if we don't get something out of the conference that is substantive in terms of the spending and in terms of the border, then we'll do the vacate. But he never gave that a chance because you could never get to yes with this guy. And I'm sorry. Now he's going to point the finger at McCarthy and say McCarthy failed. No, the fact of the matter is this was a planned failure. And unfortunately, it's Matt Gaetz who's responsible for that failure. And I mean, and it kills me because he's right on all the things he's talking about. They're all things we need to deal with. He's right. He's just completely so obsessed with being proven to be right and changing the goalposts so you can never get anything done, that it's he he created what we were hoping to avoid. And that is a cross-aisle deal to run the government, because once that Rubicon is crossed, it never gets uncrossed. Why should McCarthy care about what Matt Gaetz thinks now? What the Freedom Caucus? If he has to do a deal to fund the government with the Democrats, why should he not change the makeup of the Rules Committee and put 2 more Democrats on and remove the 2 Freedom Caucus members, even though those 2 Freedom Caucus members were actively trying to get a deal done, get something done in terms of in the conference. He forced Matt Gaetz through his intransigence, there was never a way to get to yes, caused the Rubicon to be crossed, and now he's going to cry about the results of that, and he's going to blame McCarthy. McCarthy's not a saint. McCarthy's got lots of problems. McCarthy's, not a conservative. Let's just be, but McCarthy can't tell the liberal Republicans in the House that they have to vote for stuff because Matt Gaetz demands it, any more than he can tell Matt Gaetz that he has to vote for stuff because the liberal Republicans demand it. And given that, the fact that any deal was done is remarkable. But the fact that Matt Gaetz chose to submarine it, and chose because he wanted to get the motion to vacate, because he wants to refight the McCarthy speakership battle, the heyday of his career, is just, it's obscene. That's what I have on it. Let me tell you what I'm going to now go to what's going to happen. Okay, 45 days. Beginning last week, the House was taking up appropriations bills, individual appropriations bills. I would anticipate that the House will continue to take up individual appropriations bills, sending them over to the Senate. Every one of those appropriations bills is going to have amendments offered, opportunities to make amendments to the different things, both funding amendments and policy amendments, policy writers. And we're going to have individual votes on a whole bunch of different things. This is where McCarthy made his mistake, in my estimation. That normally happens in May, June, July. That should have happened in May, June, July, those appropriations bills individually coming up. We should have had those votes outside of the pressure of the funding of the September 30th deadline. We didn't. So now we got 45 days where those individual votes are going to happen. The House will pass some of the bills, they won't pass others. The House will send bills over. The Senate will pass whatever they want to pass. They'll either go to conference and they'll come up with something, and they'll either be able to pass the House and pass the Senate or not, and be signed by the president or not. But that's the process, and after that process is done, whatever part of the government still remains unfunded will then be up for a continuing resolution or an omnibus, which is whole total funding. CR is like short term, keep the current spending levels and just move it, push it forward a month or so. That's what a continuing resolution is. An omnibus is we're passing a funding bill for the rest of the year for all the agencies that aren't currently funded. And so what their goal will be is to get an omnibus to fund the entire government around Thanksgiving. But hopefully those individual spending bills get passed, enough of them get passed, that the things like Veterans Administration and Defense and other important agencies are funded, and we end up with a battle at the end over a limited number of agencies with a limited number of dollars, and where the stakes are much lower. That's what the hope is. The Democrats have no reason to want to do that, by the way. They want the stakes to be just as high as possible. And so will be reticent to passing appropriations bills. But the fact is, Republicans and the House should have had those bills on the Democrats' desk and the Senate for them to accept or reject much earlier than this. So that's where McCarthy's culpable. He should have done the timeline of the calendar to force those votes early. And by not doing that, he allowed, this kind of scenario to develop. But from a power perspective, McCarthy's never had more support in the conference. He may not have 218, but he's never had more support in the conference because there's one guy who 90% of the House Republican Conference is rallying against, and his picture's is on the screen, and that's just just a sad fact. And I'm really glad that he went on CNN this morning to talk about that, because it's or last evening, I guess. No, it was this morning, to talk about that, because CNN is they're the ones who are happy that this occurred, because he just gave power to the Democrats. Because if McCarthy has to go across the aisle to get votes, the Democrats will exact costs, and those costs are going to be bad for the American people. And he's negated the Republican majority by doing what he's done. And I don't say that lightly. I've been involved in trying to get rid of multiple speakers. We're trying to get rid of Boehner. I was involved in that from nearly day one. I've been involved in a number of these fights. And truth be told, I've never seen one that was where the entire plan was to get to vacate the chair, but there was no idea, no clue how to actually proceed beyond that. And that's what we have today. And it makes me mad, because we work really hard to get some things done to try to stop this being besieged. We talk about using the appropriations process to be able to the power of the purse. And while mouthing the words of the power of the purse, Matt Gaetz effectively negated the capacity to use it in many respects. Because every negotiating thing that Chip Roy or anybody else comes up with in terms of doing some things and putting amendments on to bills and stuff, the Democrats can say to McCarthy, you don't need to do that with us. And eventually, and effectively, like I say, negated the Republican majority in the House. So great job, Matt. Way to go. Way to think it through. I hope your YouTube hits are sky high. I hope you're able to monetize the hell out of them, because you've done great harm to the country. That's what I got. I'm going to just leave it at that. I'm too irritated. So we will. I know that many of you are Matt Gaetz fans. I'm sorry. He's off my Christmas card list. Let's put it that way. So with that, I'll look at some of the comments. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Here are the comments. Diana. Such a mess. I relate to a bunch of wildcats going into a house and just destroying the whole house. Nobody goes in to clean it. Extremely disturbing. Diana, it's a mess, and it frustrates me, and I just can't. Yeah, I think you're right. And oh, by the way, I think we saw one of the interesting things that we saw is going back to the debate, but the Republican debate, where they're all basically just clawing at each other, and really nobody wanted to talk about the problems that are being put forward through the Biden administration. Nobody wanted to talk about policy, except for Doug Burgum, from what I could tell. There was we've had 7 people who say they want to be the Republican nominee for president, and not one of them, gave more than talking points in terms of what they were doing, in terms of a plan. And it was the same kind of circus, and that's what we're seeing in the House. So it's pretty sad. Go get him out. Matt is double daring. I don't know. Truthfully, his constituents elect him to do what he's doing, and and they'll have their say in terms of whether they like what he's done or he hasn't done. And one of the things about it is, my hope is that people will. You get very few opportunities to actually pass something that has a chance to limit the size and scope of government. And funding bills are those opportunities. And to throw away an opportunity to have a fight about the border in the Senate with the people watching on an 80-20 issue, where you have the New York City mayor saying this can't be sustained, where you got people in Massachusetts being told, oh, well, do you have a spare room to put illegal immigrants to live in? Democrat states are now feeling the pain of illegal immigration. And as a result, the intransigence on the left to not do anything about it may be tempered. And it's an 80-20 issue that we win. People think uncontrolled border is a bad thing. Democrats and Republicans alike, and independents too. So it's losing that opportunity to have that discussion, have that fight is a loss for the country. Is a loss for the country. And I got into politics when I was a little kid because I love our country and I love freedom and I love individual liberty. And then I read this crazy book by Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, Anthem first, and Fountainhead, then Atlas Shrugged. And it set up this idea in my head about individual liberties when you combine it with what Thomas Jefferson wrote and the like, about the importance of the ideal. And then you have, and I grew up with that ideal. I worked my way through college running political campaigns, met my wife at a college Republican recruiting table. I've worked in politics my entire life. Now that may not be considered work, but I'm dedicated to it. I spent 9 years in the National Rifle Association fighting for the right to keep and bear arms in places where that wasn't very popular, and really having intense fights. So I'm not afraid of intense fights, but you have to have a place where you can go, a way to get to yes on anything. And at NRA, the place to yes was, there was no yes and no compromise on gun control. And sometimes it would have been better if we'd been able to do that. But the fact of the matter is, that's a fundamental right, not compromising on it, not compromising on First Amendment, not compromising on the Fourth Amendment, even though it's been compromised away, Fifth Amendment. We're not compromising on those things. I spent my adult life beyond the NRA. I've spent my adult life, I worked in Congress for a short while. I've worked in the Bush administration. I've done stuff specifically to try to advance freedom in this country. I've been with Americans for Limited Government for about 11 years, trying to advance freedom in this country. And to have opportunity, and there's opportunities are rare. They're few and far between. The system's set up to continually expand government, and to stand against it and see one of the opportunities to actually do something to protect our borders, protect our basic sovereignty, thrown away. And what it was essentially a childish temper tantrum. It breaks my heart, makes me mad. And I hope that Matt Gaetz grows up and becomes an actual mature man and understands that sometimes you have to figure out how to get to yes in order to do anything. And if your objective is just to destroy, and your objective is not to grow and build, and to take a little bite if it's there, if that's your objective, then you're in the wrong business. There's things where if we have the power, trust me, if we have a Donald Trump as president, let's say, a Republican Senate and a Republican House, we should run the table on these people. We should do everything we can to destroy the administrative state. We should do everything we can to destroy the regulatory state. We should strengthen our military without strengthening the intelligence apparatus that's been undermining our country. Those are things that we have to do. Those are fights we have to have, but you have those fights when you can win. You have those fights now to set up winning. But if you're going to spend all your time arguing who's going to be speaker, who's going to be ASB president in high school, spend all your time arguing over that, nobody takes you seriously on issues. This is an opportunity to actually fight on issues in the House. Have votes on this appropriation bill on issues. Let's draw the line in the sand between us and the left. And let's use that. So in 2024, during the election, we're talking about those things. And it's credible, and there's real bills. And then in 2025, when we win, we ram them down their throats. That's how you win. Not by throwing a temper tantrum and saying, oh, I'm going to get rid of the speaker to get what I want. Heaven help us from babies, from little crying babies who don't have the common sense to understand how you win. Drives me nuts, don't like it, and as you can tell, I'm pissed. And with that, before I say anything that gets me in real trouble, I'm going to sign off. Have a blessed day. I'm sorry for getting so rounded, but it just, gosh. Take care, folks.